The pandemic has everyone feeling pretty worn down these days, right? But now is an important time to make sure that you are taking care of yourself, not just physically, but emotionally too. There's a lot to be overwhelmed by right now, but this morning we're seeking some positivity. Monica Berg is a spiritual thought leader, podcast host, and author, and she joins us live with some tips on how to live your best life right now. Monica, good morning. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
I think it's been a tough almost 2 years now for a lot of people. And I know I've said this in talking with some of my friends, no matter where you're at in life, everyone just feels kind of stuck right now. But you've got some advice, 3 tips for really maximizing your potential.
Yes, I know. Who thought that we would be in the situation 2 years later?
Yeah.
And I think most people have a hard time managing stress and getting their happiness up on a normal time. So this experience for us has been more difficult than we had imagined. I think that it's important to keep perspective. I would say that's first and foremost, to be able to live with audacity to dream big. So just because we find ourselves in a difficult situation and not really knowing where we're going to end up and the world feels very uncertain, it's still very important to be able to be clear about your own goals, where you want to go. And I think the shift that needs to happen is to, instead of focusing on doing, we focus on being. We think about who it is we want to become in this world, and we start to take very actionable small steps daily to accomplish that and achieve it. I think often we, again, wait for things to be better in order to really experience life and enjoy it in the way that we want to. But as we've seen in these past years, that's not something that should be put on hold. So it's really about waking up each and every day and saying, okay, what is one small step I can take to doing something that I believe in, that I find purpose and fulfillment in?
Yeah, do you think it's tough right now, especially as we're faced with so many challenges? Do we let those kind of become bigger than they should be?
Well, the reality is we're always going to have challenges in life, right? I mean, that is the only constant. And I think, again, we approach life thinking, well, once I pass this challenge, then I'll do this, right? If this happens, then I'll be happy. And you really can't live life like that, as we've seen in these past 2 years. I think it's really important to wake up each day and decide the day that you're going to have, which means we can't be overly focused on external feedback, right? Or validation. We really have to cultivate that from within, that we give ourselves internal feedback, right? I mean, you woke up this morning, how did you decide your day was going to be? And of course, things will come up and they will be challenging, but they'll only be as challenging as you let them.
Yeah.
Because the ability to control what we think and how we see things is one of our greatest strengths.
So let's talk about trying to cut down on some stress and reduce tension in our lives. I think everyone has been operating at a level of a lot of stressors, right? So how does that affect our ability to handle stress and try to reduce the tension in our day-to-day?
Well, the more that you engage with stress and you allow it to affect you, the more it's going to limit you, right? And it eventually affects our health, mentally, emotionally, physically. If you look at all of the things that stress is, and as I've written about fear, it's very equal to worry, right? So that's a place that you can find yourself when it's going to be your norm. And that's just a really uncomfortable place to be. I like to see stress as an indication of something that needs to change in your life, right? Stress is an emotion, and often people take their emotions too seriously. But if we understand that stress is there to say, okay, it's a signal that something you're doing in your life or the way that you're perceiving it or living it is not healthy for you. And in that way, it can actually be quite positive, because then you can decide what it is that you want to change in life. And we can really change anything. Again, I think we underestimate just how powerful we are.
Yeah.
I think also that when we find ourselves stressful, we have to ask, will this really matter 10 years from now? This person said this thing to me, or that person thought this thing, or I didn't get the deal that I wanted. In 10 years, does that one piece of information really matter? Or what's the bigger picture here, right?
Right.
Because in the end, you're good.
A
Go
very
ahead.
good way to, a really good way to reframe it. Real quickly, we're almost out of time, but I did want to mention you've got 2 books out right now, Fear is Not an Option and Rethink Love. So tell us about each of these if someone's looking for a little positive reading these days.
Yeah, they're very appropriate, especially now. Fear is not an option means when you find yourself in a place of fear and you ask yourself, fear is no longer an option, you're going to think of another way to get over where you find yourself in life. There's a ton of tips and tools in there to help that state of mind, to really eradicate fear from your life. And Rethink Love is everything with love. Also, mainly at the beginning of the first 8 chapters of the book are about the relationship you have with yourself.
Mm.
So you really know who you are, what you believe, and you're able to grow those parts of yourselves that work for you and release the parts and the limiting belief systems that don't.
Yeah, I think the pandemic has given a lot of people a lot of time at home, either with themselves or with a partner, to, really dig deep on some of that stuff. So excellent topics to get into. Thanks for getting us right in the right mindset, getting us back on track through this pandemic, Monica. Great to talk with you.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Of course, and you can pick up either of her books, listen to her podcast, Spiritually Hungry. We'll have a link with more info on coin.com.